Hello everybody and welcome to Tiger Tales, the place you'll find stories and fanfictions written and read to you by your host, me, Tai Tiger. Today we're diving back into Power Rangers Universe 113 and Power Rangers Future Foundation, the very first story that ever got written onto Tiger Tales. This story had taken a dramatic turn. In the last chapter, it ended with CJ tampering with a universal dimensional jumping device, which CJ required after Dante used it to get to Universe 19. It was given to the team by Mark the Red Cornish Ranger, so CJ wanted to see what she could do with it. Well, that machine kinda went bang, and Kira, Adam, and Xander was left stunned after they found the team vanished after the explosion. So why don't we dive into this chapter and find out what happened to the team, shall we?
Welcome to Universe 113, a place where an old evil has continued its quest for ultimate power, starting by kidnapping previous Rangers and stealing their powers. But not all is lost, as a new generation of Rangers is born, bringing new life to the legendary powers that came before them. They are the new heroes of Earth. They are Power Rangers Future Foundation.
Power Rangers Future Foundation, Chapter 30. Dante lost in Universe 2118. Dante opened his eyes and found himself in a crater. He remembered himself falling from incredible heights, and he remembered hitting the ground. He climbed to his feet as he recalled CJ tampering with the portal device. He then remembered it going off like a grenade. Dante crawled out of the ditch that he was in and found himself on a cliffside, looking down at a village. On one of the big buildings had a massive Puerto Rico flag hanging off the side of it, and he could hear people yelling in Spanish. "Okay, I'm in Puerto Rico. Great," Dante muttered. Then he pressed his communicator. "Hey, CJ. Luca. Amy, do you read? Babe, pick up. Xander?" Dante called out. Dante sighed. Then he headed down the cliff and entered town. He walked around and nosed around the market stands. Then he ventured off and found himself on the outskirts of town, close to some boats, where they were stationed near the pier. As he was gazing past the boat, suddenly he could hear laughing behind him. He turned around to find Nephis stood there, an evil ranger who once turned up in his city. It was then that the team befriended the Red Cornish Ranger. "When did you get back, Nephis?" Dante barked. "Back? Please, pretty boy. You're in my domain now," Nephis growled. "Oh. Wait, I'm not in Universe 113 anymore?" Dante muttered. "What? You didn't know?" Nephis asked with a chuckle. "The explosion must have sent me here," Dante sighed. "I'm gonna have to bring you in now," Nephis grinned. "Yeah, you're gonna have to fight me first," Dante barked. Then he held out his power morpher. "Mastodon!" he barked, and in a flash of black light he morphed into the Black Mighty Morphin Black Ranger. "Oh, please, haven't we danced this dance before?" Nephis growled. Then she struck her morpher and morphed into the Royal Blue Ranger. The Royal Blue Ranger ran at the Black Ranger. They exchanged blows, sparks flying off the both of them. In the Museum and Library of Ancient History, Brohan walked into the basement and found the four boys all chilling out. Eric was doing some training. Elias was reading a book on mythology. Lip was just chilling in his bed listening to music. And Mark was on a multiversal video call with the Pink Cornish Ranger. An alternate version of himself had a daughter. She grew up and lost her father. So Mark made it a thing that he'd keep an eye on her, train her when he could, and the relationship built into a father-daughter relationship. So, yeah, we found him, we brought him in, he's settling in okay, but it's going to take a while before I think he's ready for a mission, Minnie explained.
"Ah, sweetie, I'm glad things are going well. We are slowly taking down Loki's forces, slowly freeing the gods, and overall, the people as well,"
Mark told her. "That's awesome," Minnie cheered. Brohan cleared his throat and everyone turned to him. "Boys, I'm gonna need you in the camera room. Something odd is happening," Brohan told them. Then he turned around and walked back upstairs.
"I'll call you later, okay? Love you,"
Mark said to Minnie. "Love you too, Dad. Talk to you later," Minnie said. Then they both hung up and the four boys ran upstairs to find Himiko and Brohan conversing in the camera room.
"What's going on?"
Eric asked.
The alarm didn't go off.
Elias muttered.
There's something going on.
Himiko told them. What do you mean something's going on? Lip asked. Everyone looked on screen and they saw Nephis in her ranger form fighting a black ranger.
I didn't realize there was other rangers brought here.
Himiko sighed.
He is a Mighty Morphin Power Ranger. I have met a few of them on my travels.
Mark told the team.
One of my best friends back home is a Black Mighty Morphin Ranger.
Eric said with a small smile. There is more than this strange fight going on. A little while ago, an explosion made a pure universal energy erupted in the sky, and a figure crash-landed not far from where this fight is pursuing. Brohan explained.
An explosion like that only happens when something is forced through a universal barrier.
Elias told everyone.
So that figure that crashed is our Black Ranger friend?
Mark stated.
Hey, this guy is fighting Nephis. Shouldn't we count that as a win? He is fighting one of our enemies.
Eric asked.
A bad guy can still fight a bad guy.
Himiko snapped.
Mark is the boss here.
Elias said. Everyone looked over to Mark.
Let's go help our mystery guest out. Then we can see what to do next.
Mark ordered. The team teleported away and teleported onto the street. There they found the two rangers fighting.
Alright guys, let's stop Nephis. That is the first thing we must do.
Mark ordered.
It's morphin' time!
Mark called out. Mark held out his Cornish power morpher, and it popped open.
Kono bis ficken!
Mark called out. Then the morpher dematerialized, leaving the coin floating there. Mark then morphed into his ranger suit. His helmet formed over his head. Then the coin started spinning and it flew at Mark, hitting Mark in the chest. The coin shattered, and Mark's Cornish chest shield formed around him. Mark had morphed into the red Cornish Ranger. Eric held out his fist. His green Celtic ring started to glow.
Now you're not, Kilchuck!
Eric called out. Then he held up his fist into the air and suddenly a Celtic rune formed above him. He then lowered his arm and the rune lowered itself down and it phased over Eric, his ranger suit forming over him as the rune descended down. As the rune touched the ground, it vanished. Eric had morphed into the gold Celtic Ranger. Elias pulled off his necklace and crushed the crystal in his hand. The energy that came from the crystal formed into a sword sheathed in its shield. Elias grabbed the handle which extended from the top of the shield and pulled the sword out and held it up to the sky.
The Odenskraft Volven Veda.
Elias called out. Then the blue energy seeped out of its blade and it formed around him. Then the energy formed into his ranger suit. His horns grew from his helmet as he sheathed his sword. Elias had morphed into the blue Viking Ranger. Lip held out his arm. Ra appeared behind him and sunk his talons into his forearm. White veins rippled through his wrist and a wristbound morpher appeared in the shape of a falcon head. Lip then held out his black crystal scarab, its wings opened and the key extended. He then opened the falcon's mouth and placed the key inside and then closed the mouth down. Capra! Lip called out. Then the falcon eyes started to glow and the energy wave pulsed from his morpher and it wrapped around Lip's entire body, forming into his ranger suit. Ra, the god of the sun, then merged into Lip's body and his helmet formed around his head. Lip had morphed into the white Egyptian Ranger of Ra. Himiko grabbed the cherry blossom hairpin that kept her hair up, and she pulled it out, her hair draping over her shoulders.
It's henshin time. Neo no mayo no temi ni.
Himiko called out. Then the tip of the pin started glowing. She dropped the pin and it sank into the ground through a veil of light. Then Himiko was encased in a giant flower bud. The pink flower started to glow, and it opened. The flower exploded in a flurry of petals. Himiko stood there in her ranger suit. She had morphed into the pink Japanese Ranger. The 5 rangers ran into the fight. The black Mighty Morphin Ranger stood there stunned as the pink Japanese Ranger jumped overhead and slashed down her katana, the Royal Blue Ranger jumping back, dodging the attack. The gold Celtic Ranger charged in with his javelin and jabbed at the Royal Blue Ranger, who managed to block each strike. Then the Blue Viking Ranger slammed into the Royal Ranger, knocking her backwards, but then he swung his sword and slashed at her. The gold and pink Rangers joined in and struck the Royal Blue Ranger, then the Ranger of Ra came flying in. Whoa, that's a Ranger of wings, the Black Ranger muttered. The Ranger of Ra grabbed the Royal Blue Ranger and lifted her into the air, then let go. Suddenly, the Red Cornish Ranger jumped up and swung saber and the Dragon Dagger, slashing the Royal Blue Ranger several times in an array of attacks, before kicking her back down to the ground. Then the Royal Blue Ranger stood slowly, grunting in pain. She then hit her morpher and teleported away, leaving the Black Mighty Morphing Ranger with the Power Rangers global team.
Alright, man. Who are you?
The Blue Viking Ranger barked. Well... The Black Ranger grunted.
It's okay. We ain't going to hurt you.
The Red Cornish Ranger stated. Oh, please. You'd be so lucky, Mark, the Black Ranger chuckled. The global team looked at each other, each one kinda confused. The Black Ranger demorphed, and Dante Secura stood there with a grin on his face. The Red Cornish Ranger also demorphed, and Mark stood there and chuckled slightly.
Well, I'll be. If it isn't Dante.
Mark said with a grin. Hey man, Dante chuckled. The two of them hugged, and the other Rangers all demorphed. The Gold Celtic Ranger, however, stood there watching Dante. So this must be Universe 2118, huh? And this is the team you told me about, huh? Dante asked.
Nice to meet you. I'm Elias.
Elias said, grabbing Dante's hand and shaking it with some speed as his excitement over a new ranger grew. Dante couldn't help but notice that Elias reminded him of Xander.
That is right. This is Lip and Himiko.
Mark stated. Nice to meet you, Lip said, holding out his hand. You too. Dante grinned, shaking it. Himiko walked over and offered her hand out. Nice to meet you, Dante said, and took Himiko's hand and kissed it gently.
Oh, he's quite the charmer,
Himiko said with a slightly red cheek.
Yeah, Dante always had a way with the ladies,
said the Gold Celtic Ranger. Everyone looked over at the Gold Celtic Ranger. Dante looked rather confused, then the Ranger demorphed, and Eric stood there. Eric? Dante said, confused, and his confusion turned into a small grin.
Yeah man, it's me.
Eric grinned, then Eric and Dante hugged. Dude, I thought you were at your dojo. I didn't realize you left to join Mark's team. This is so insane. Dante cheered.
Who knew our mystery guest was you?
Eric chuckled. Hey, I'm just a shot, Dante said. Then he went silent. His face went serious. He turned to Mark. You never said Nephis was one of your issues, Dante said to Mark.
It's okay. Turns out, she's someone's lackey,
Mark said with a slight grin.
Don't mean to be rude, but how are you here, Dante?
Himiko asked. CJ was fiddling with the portal projector Mark gave me, and it kind of went bang. I think, Dante replied, slightly unsure. The team led Dante to their base, the Museum and Library of Ancient History. Dante looked around in awe, then Brohan walked in and introduced himself. Nice to meet you, Brohan said. Brohan. Why on earth does that name sound familiar? Dante muttered. My brother is Zordon from Universe 19. Shinon is also my sister, Brohan explained. Oh, yeah, okay, I see the resemblance, Dante gasped. Dante spent the next few hours hanging with the team as Brohan and Himiko searched for ways to send him home safely. Hello everybody, I apologise for butting in on what you're listening to, but I wanted to introduce you guys to a brand new podcast called the Tiger Nexus Podcast. I'm Tai Tiger, and I'm the host. I'm mostly known for the Tiger Tales YouTube channels, where you'll find stories and fanfictions that I write and read to you guys. I'm also a co-founder of the 3 Ranger Bro Studios, but I wanted to dive into this whole podcasting thing. I'm a content creator and I adore making content of all sorts of varieties, and I want to interview people that enjoy and make content as well. And we're talking about all sorts of things, from TikToks to YouTube to story writing to storytelling, podcasts, movies and TV shows, all forms of content you can think of. I want to interview people about. So there's going to be lots of different variety. So make sure you check out the Tiger Nexus podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Loki sat there laughing as Nephix explained what happened. Stop laughing, okay? He's a powerful ranger. Him and Mark make a good duo. Nephix barked. It's all good, dear. I already have something in mind. Loki grinned. Nephis looked at Loki with a raised eyebrow on top of a not an impressed look. Loki gestured for Nephis to turn around, and she did, and saw two monsters before her. A humanoid lion with a white arm. The white arm had a goat-shaped shoulder pad. The other arm had a snake-shaped whip wrapped round it. Kimmeroar? Really? Nephis sneered. Stood next to the Chimera monster was a dark red and brown large snake with a dragon-like head with horns, and the snake stood as tall as the Chimera monster. It was called a Uctina. Why are these two back? They got defeated, Nephis asked. These are just husks, echoes, if you will, of what once was. Loki chuckled. He waved his hand, and the staff in his hand started rippling with green energy, and then it surged into the monsters and the mythical creature. Then in a flash of light, the two beings merged. The monster's snake whip now formed into now an upgraded whip. It now looked like the Uctina. The monster roared out in power. It's now stupid but more powerful. Send it off, and make sure it comes back victorious, Loki ordered. Dante sat next to Elias, who cut in asking him a lot of questions.
So you have two ranger forms. The silver wolf Zord you speak of, it gifted you its powers?
Elias asked him. Yeah, so I was on my animarium. We had this big fight, and I lost. But I was so close to dying when the wolf Zord kind of came to my aid and upgraded me, I guess. I now have two ranger sets, Dante explained.
So, all your rangers are next generation?
Elias asked. Yep, pretty much, Dante nodded. Eric walked up to them and punched Elias in the shoulder.
Dude, he's a person who's trying to get home. Not your personal information sponge who you can geek over.
Eric barked. It's okay, honestly. I kind of find it nuts that you have no Power Rangers in your world, Dante replied.
Well, there is, but they are TV show characters.
Elias chuckled awkwardly.
Guys, we found some stuff on multiversal travel, but it might not work as we don't have the tech or magic.
Himiko said as she walked up to them holding a big pile of books. Guys, it's okay, I ain't worried, Dante grinned. Then suddenly Mart barged into the room.
Hey, Dante, want to help out on some ranger business?
Mark asked. Dante stood with fists clenched and a grin on his face. That's an obvious yes, Dante cheered. Mark then showed everyone the computer screen in the computer room, and the Global Rangers were rather confused. Guys, didn't we beat the Chimera monster already and freed the Chimera? Lip blurted.
But its arms looks like that snake thing we had to fight.
Eric sighed.
Maybe. Nephis went back crying to Loki, so he did something out of the ordinary to handle something out of the ordinary.
Mark grunted. I'm sorry, whoa, back up a minute. Did you guys say Loki? Dante chuckled.
You think that's funny? We mean the actual god of mischief here.
Himiko said with a cheeky grin. The actual god. As in Norse god. Mark, Eric, what the hell have you guys been up to? Dante sighed. The Rangers then all teleported to Rome, where they found the mutated monster terrorizing its civilians.
You ready, bro?
Sounds like the Dante we all know and love.
Eric asked Dante. Please, I'm always ready. Dante chuckled. Mark grinned. Lead the way, Mark. Let's show Dante how this team works, Lip said.
It's morphin' time!
Mark called out. Mark held out his Cornish power morpher, and it popped open.
Kono bis ficken!
Mark called out. Then the morpher dematerialized, leaving the coin floating there. Mark then morphed into his ranger suit. His helmet formed over his head. Then the coin started spinning and it flew at Mark, hitting Mark in the chest. The coin shattered, and Mark's Cornish chest shield formed around him. Mark had morphed into the red Cornish Ranger. Eric held out his fist. His green Celtic ring started to glow.
Now you're not, Kilchuck!
Eric called out. Then he held up his fist into the air and suddenly a Celtic rune formed above him. He then lowered his arm and the rune lowered itself down and it phased over Eric, his ranger suit forming over him as the rune descended down. As the rune touched the ground, it vanished. Eric had morphed into the gold Celtic Ranger. Elias pulled off his necklace and crushed the crystal in his hand. The energy that came from the crystal formed into a sword sheathed in its shield. Elias grabbed the handle which extended from the top of the shield and pulled the sword out and held it up to the sky.
The Ordenskraft Volden Veda.
Elias called out. Then the blue energy seeped out of its blade and it formed around him. Then the energy formed into his ranger suit. His horns grew from his helmet as he sheathed his sword. Elias had morphed into the blue Viking Ranger. Lip held out his arm. Ra appeared behind him and sunk his talons into his forearm. White veins rippled through his wrist and a wristbound morpher appeared in the shape of a falcon head. Lip then held out his black crystal scarab, its wings opened and the key extended. He then opened the falcon's mouth and placed the key inside and then closed the mouth down. Capra! Lip called out. Then the falcon eyes started to glow and the energy wave pulsed from his morpher and it wrapped around Lip's entire body, forming into his ranger suit. Ra, the god of the sun, then merged into Lip's body and his helmet formed around his head. Lip had morphed into the white Egyptian Ranger of Ra. Himiko grabbed the cherry blossom hairpin that kept her hair up, and she pulled it out, her hair draping over her shoulders.
Attention time. Neo no Mayo no Temi me.
Himiko called out. Then the tip of the pin started glowing. She dropped the pin and it sank into the ground through a veil of light. Then Himiko was encased in a giant flower bud. The pink flower started to glow, and it opened. The flower exploded in a flurry of petals. Himiko stood there in her ranger suit. She had morphed into the pink Japanese Ranger. Dante held out his morpher. Mastodon! He called out, and then in a surge of black light, Dante morphed into the Black Mighty Morphin Power Ranger. The 6 rangers ran at the monster, who quickly raised his hand and summoned a group of mummies. The Ranger of Ra swooped in, picked up a mummy, and dropped it onto another. The gold Celtic Ranger stabbed a mummy with his javelin, then smacked it in the head. He then swung it across the ground and tripped a couple of mummies over. The pink Samurai Ranger ran at the upgraded Chimera monster and slashed it several times with her katana. Then the Chimera beast released its new Uktina whip. This snake-headed whip moved on its own, striking the pink snake faster than it did beforehand, and it lifted her into the air, and she grunted in pain as she tried to free herself. Hang on, Pink, the Black Mighty Morphin Power Ranger barked. He started running at the monster. The Red Cornish Ranger summoned his power axe and tossed it to the Black Ranger.
I believe you. We'll want this.
The Red Cornish Ranger called out. The Black Ranger caught the axe at the same time he summoned his own. Power axe, twin tusk formation! He yelled out and jumped up and spun around and sliced the snake whip, forcing it to drop the Pink Ranger. The Black Ranger caught the Samurai Ranger and landed on the ground safely as he put the Pink Ranger down.
My hero!
The Pink Ranger mocked. The Blue Viking Ranger slammed into the Chimera monster, ramming the rim of his shield into the monster, allowing himself to follow up with a double sword slash. Then the Chimera booted the Viking Ranger, making him slide backwards. Then he turned to the Red Cornish Ranger.
I think I have a plan that might just work, but you're gonna have to trust me.
The Blue Viking Ranger told his leader.
Dude, you have a mind for this sort of thing. What's your idea?
The Red Cornish Ranger asked. The Blue Viking Ranger explained his plan to the other Rangers. Man, you have to meet Amy, the Black Ranger chuckled. Then the Ranger of Ra took flight again and grabbed hold of the Black Ranger. Hold on tight, new kid, the Ranger of Ra barked. Then he took flight and pulled the Black Ranger up into the air. He kept flying up and up and up, all the way up into the sky as high as he could. Then he spun around and threw the Black Ranger further up into the sky. The Blue Viking Ranger jumped onto the Snake Whip and pinned it to the floor with his blade. Then the Pink Samurai Ranger bolted up with a quick slash of her katana and beheaded the horned dragon-like Snake Whip. The snake withered away and vanquished in nothing but ash. Then the Red Cornish Ranger came in right up close, with saber in hand. He dived in with a flurry of attacks, dancing around the monster as he dealt some deathly blows to the creature. Then the Blue Viking Ranger ran in and uppercut the monster with a shield, knocking the monster up into the air. The Ranger of Ra then swooped in, grabbed the monster, and tossed him into the air himself, and then slashed it a couple times with his claws. Then the Pink Ranger teleported next to the monster and slashed it a couple times with her sword. The Gold Celtic Ranger bounced off the Viking Ranger's shield, springing it up into the air. He then jabbed the monster several times before throwing his javelin past the monster. The Black Ranger demorphed, and his morpher glimmered in a silver light, shifted to the silver growl morpher. Dante grabbed the morpher, quickly morphed into the silver Wild Force Ranger. He then held his hand and caught the Gold Celtic Ranger's javelin. He saw the monster flying up towards him. As he fell towards it, he summoned his Lunar Clue in blaster mode and started blasting the monster. Just before they made physical contact, the silver Wild Force Ranger threw the javelin. The Ranger fell past the monster as it blew up, and the Ranger of Ra caught the Silver Ranger and placed him on the ground. Everyone cheered. They all demorphed, and Eric and Dante high-fived.
Nice shot, dude!
Eric cheered. Yeah, man. And Elias, dude, awesome plan. Dante chuckled.
He has a thing for out-of-the-ordinary plans.
Himiko smiled.
We've got to get back to the museum.
Mark told everyone, and they all teleported back. They all teleported into the museum and found a purple ranger talking to Brohan. Mark and Dante looked at each other as they recognized the ranger suit. It looked kind of like an Ultra Ranger, Dante stated.
Did you know there was a purple one?
Mark asked. Nope, Dante said with a stern look. And look, here they are. Guys, come here. Brohan called everyone over.
Who's this?
Himiko asked. Everyone, might I introduce you to Aisha, the Purple Ultra Ranger, hailing from Universe 19. She has a very important mission, Brohan explained. The Ranger demorphed. Hello, everyone, she said with a warm smile.
Define the term, has a mission.
Eric said sternly. I'm here for Dante. To return him home, Aisha stated. Wait, you want to take me back to Universe 113? Dante asked. Adam sent me himself, Aisha said. Dante turned to the Power Rangers Global. Looks like this is my ride, Dante said. Elias walked over and hugged him. Hey man, people might find you over the top, or overbearing, 'cause you see things from a different angle. I say they can all screw themselves. The way that you saw that fight, and then angled it to our advantage, was absolutely fantastic, Dante told him.
Thanks. You're a great ranger. It's funny because I actually knew who you were. My dad's friend created you in my universe, but you're a lot more awesome in person.
Elias said to Dante. Dante nodded and then turned to Himiko. Being the only girl has its benefits, you know, Dante said to her.
Oh yeah? How'd you figure that?
Himiko asked. You gotta tell all these dumbasses to stay in line, and I can tell you already do that pretty good. Dante chuckled. They hugged, and then he turned to Lip. Hey man, I get it. You don't like the new guy, and I can tell you have a lot on your shoulders. But just remember this. A ranger team is a team for a reason, and every ranger is just as important, Dante told him. Thanks. And I gotta say, seeing you in action, I can see why Eric and Mark respect you so much, Lip said. Dante chuckled, and then hugged him. He then turned to Mark.
You're welcome back any time, and if you need me, or hell, all of us, we will help you.
Mark said to him. Thanks, man, and that goes for you. The Future Foundation is always here if you need us, Dante told Mark.
I will keep note of that.
Mark grinned. Oh, one more thing. I'm glad to see you're okay, Mark. The last time I saw you, you were rage-filled. It was kind of off-putting. And then seeing you here now, leading a team, Taking on a god? It seems insane, but you seem more eased, Dante said to him.
Shame we didn't run into Nephis again. Would have been fun going a few rounds. Knock her off her pedestal.
Mark chuckled. Oh yeah, there's always a next time for that though. Dante grinned. Then they hugged each other. Then Dante turned to one of his best friends.
Man, it's been a blast having you around. I miss chilling with you, bro.
Eric stated. Same here, dude. Hey, you ever want to pop home for a couple rounds? I'm always game, Dante said to him.
You tell Xander, if he doesn't stay in line, I will hop through all universes to wipe the floor with him.
Eric joked. I'll make sure he gets the message. Dante chuckled. The two boys hugged, and then Dante turned to Aisha and Brohan. Dante held his hand out. Thank you, sir, for letting me stay here for a couple hours. Which was the weirdest day of my life, Dante chuckled. It's been a pleasure, Dante Securus, Brohan said with a slight bow, and then he shook his hand. Then Aisha smiled at Dante and pressed her watch, and a huge portal opened in the middle of the room, and Aisha and Dante walked through it. The portal closed behind them, leaving the Power Rangers Global in Universe 2118, and Dante headed back to Universe 113. And there you have it, guys. Our first adventure across the multiverse. Dante is heading home safely. Power Rangers Global and Universe 2118 is actually an ongoing storyline found here on Tiger Tales, but you can also find it on Nerds Through Comics. You can find that podcast anywhere you can find podcasts. Power Rangers Global is a storyline created by the Three Ranger Bros. We have myself, I'm the writer of the story, and I work with the two other Ranger Bros to create the story. There's Mark, the Red Cornish Ranger, the voice actor for Mark, the Red Cornish Ranger. He hosts the story on his podcast, Nursery Comics. Then we have the third member and the guy who started it all, Cosplay Dude 637. He's the voice actor for Eric in this storyline, and he created Eric himself. He has his own Power Ranger universe, and his own storylines on Power Rangers Universe 19. You can find that podcast on anywhere you can find podcasts. The other people were voiced by Cosplay Dude's family, Cosplay Wife 67 who played Himiko, and Cosplay Son 67 who played Elias. I hope you guys enjoyed this story. Make sure you check out the Three Ranger Bros' podcast like I just mentioned, and then make sure you check out the other Tiger Tales channels. Tiger Tales The Lost Stories, Tiger Tales Game Over, and Tiger Tales The Mysterious Origins. Each channel is unique in its own right and has their own sets of stories for you to check out. Subscribe to this channel, and of course I shall see you guys real soon.